The Knicks started hot, but a second half barrage from James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and the Clippers leads to a double-digit loss. We're talking about it right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolfe. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, as you can find at thestrick.land. And he's Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and the Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. On today's episode, we're going to be talking through the Knicks' unfortunate loss to the Clippers at home. Things looked like they might be going okay in the first half. The Knicks were up. They were up by double digits at times. Then things fell apart in the second half. James Harden, Kawhi Leonard both go nuts at the end of the third quarter, early fourth. A double-digit lead for the Knicks at one point suddenly turns into a double-digit deficit. The Knicks tried their best to claw back, couldn't quite do it. Cam Payne also sprains his ankle. Too much of that going around right now for Knicks point guards. Don't like it. So we'll see. He was able to play the rest of the first half, but sat the whole second half after spraining it. So we'll see how severe that is in the coming weeks or days, hopefully. But anyway, we're going to get into all that and more on today's episode. But first, we want to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit the auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And if that's not enough for you, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Knicks daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and you can start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. Gavin, something to write home about, I guess. Today, the Knicks lose 126-113 to the Clippers. To me, it basically all boiled, well, not all, but mostly boiled down to the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. That was where the game was lost. The Knicks were up double digits in the first half. Things were humming. You figured that the Clippers would counterpunch probably in the second half. You know, third quarters have not been kind to the Knicks necessarily. And they did counterpunch, but then they just kept punching. And the Knicks never really had the answer to stop their comeback. And then the Clippers just took their liberties. And I was looking at the like scoring breakdown, you know, the play-by-play breakdown, and I didn't tally it up totally, but I think it was like Harden had like almost a solo 11-0 run, I think, at one point.
He had 3 straight threes, so it was at least 9. But
yeah, and then Kawhi Leonard similarly just destroyed them with a number of threes made, and then, you know, got it cooking from the mid-range. And after he had kind of a rough first half, he had a very good second half. Just wasn't meant to be. The Clippers in this one, I think, had, I don't think it's disputable at all, the two best players on the floor. And that was ultimately what doomed the Knicks in this one.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is one of those nights where you find it hard to crap on anyone specific. I'll find a way because I've been a little negative this year overall, but I thought the Knicks for the most part did what they could with some caveats that we'll get into, but they were up early. What was it, 11-2, and then obviously 34-22 at the end. I'm going to try one more time. 33. I didn't sleep a lot. I was telling you, 33-20 at the end of the first quarter. They were up 33-19 in the first quarter. And from that point forward, Clippers outscored them by 26. Like, you could even go earlier than the third. Like the second quarter, the Clippers outscored them 34-22. And there was a number of reasons for that. I mean, you could point to one, the lineup they played to open the quarter had it was Tyler Kolek, Landry Shamet, Mikal Bridges, Precious Achiuwa, Mitchell Robinson. It really, really tough to score against a top 3 defense with that specific lineup out there. The low light to me was at one point. This is not with like the shot clock expiring. This was 14 seconds on the shot clock. Precious curled around to get a dribble handoff from Mitchell Robinson and proceeded to clank like a 20-foot jumper. And that a clank is actually strong because the shot barely skimmed front iron. So to me, that summarized like why you don't want to put that lineup out there. People would rightfully argue that, look, the Knicks were down to about 7 players. Personally, I would have tried to go with Kevin McCullough Jr., even though he just made his NBA debut the other day, over Precious Achiuwa. The Knicks, Alex, this year now with Jalen Brunson, are we don't even have to say with Jalen Brunson off the floor for the season. We'll just say Jalen Brunson off the floor the past 10 games. They have a 96 offensive rating when Precious is on the floor. And that is me rounding up. They absolutely cannot score the basketball. I think that was further exacerbated by the fact that they had Kolek out there instead of Payne. Payne did turn his ankle, but he didn't sit with it, even though he turned it midway through the first quarter. He didn't sit with it until the start of the second half. And he actually played pretty well the rest of the first half. It was one of their better options in the quarter. I would have inserted Kolek with the starters, brought Payne back in with the second unit, just because I think you very clearly need initiation. That's not Mikal Bridges with that group, even if it's playing Josh Hart. And I know Josh Hart had 3 fouls, so that's maybe why we got that lineup. But the thing, like with Mikal at this point, that I think is clear to everyone is that he, like, and this is probably the single biggest issue the Knicks have on offense right now. He cannot draw double teams. He gets the ball on the move, and the best that he can do is draw, I'll call it a 1.5 team, where he's catching, coming around a curl, and he will drive and he will draw a step from someone like James Harden. And now, instead of creating an open shot for someone, he's creating a gap for someone. And that can be taken advantage of. Like, there was a play where he drove. Harden took a step towards him. He sprayed it to Kolek. Kolek attacked the gap, drove, shuffled it off to Precious Achiuwa for a layup, right? That's great, but it's hard to like survive that way against a great defense if you're only creating gaps and two of the players around you are Precious Achiuwa and Mitchell Robinson. Karl-Anthony Towns could actually draw a double, but he's not good at passing out of them. So, like, to me, that is kind of the ultimate conundrum for the Knicks. Cam Payne gets you out of that to some extent because he, like, is good at drawing help and he is good at spraying. They didn't have a chance with him not on the floor in this game because that's not really Tyler Kolek at this point. And then they really didn't have a chance when he was out the entire second half. Like, they just kind of ran out of players. So combination of scheme, combination of lineup choices. But if you want to give credit to Tom Thibodeau, who actually thought Alex, for the most part, coached a really good game and made good adjustments, I would sum it up basically as, like, they just did not have enough guys against a team that is one of the hottest in the NBA. And to your point, has a lot of star power at the top of its roster.
Yeah, and I mean, we could talk more about how the Clippers did have that the guys that require the doubles, maybe in the next segment, and what how things fell apart. But I'll just say, like, and I mean, we've been praising the guy rightfully for the strides that he's clearly making in his game throughout his rookie season here. But, like, Kolek just isn't an offensive threat right now outside of passing the ball. Like, and I think that teams understand that too. Like, he's not quite there yet with being able to, like, create advantages for himself, in terms of, like, he could break someone down off the dribble, but what he does with it is, he just doesn't quite have the layup package yet. He doesn't quite have the stuff like what Brunson has, for example. Like, as a guy that size, you kind of in the NBA need to figure out, like, a bag, basically. You need to have your moves that you can go to create some space on the inside, and he just doesn't quite have that yet. And I think teams recognize that. So, even with the Precious and Mitch lineup, like, yeah, I'm with you. That lineup should never see the floor, honestly. Like, if Mitch is healthy any given game, like, I think we've both made this case recently, but, like, Precious probably shouldn't see the floor, because the only time when Precious should be out there is if you need, like, a backup center at this point. I just don't think Precious at power forward works, because it leads to no space, especially Precious and Mitch is just like, you have 2 non-shooting bigs out there. It just doesn't work, in today's NBA, especially if you're without Jalen Brunson, who's, like, maybe the only guy that can make that lineup work. If you were just, like, spamming pick and rolls and Brunson was working his magic on the inside and was, like, shooting 100% on mid-range shots. You know what I mean? It's like, that's pretty much the only guy on this team that could possibly make that lineup work. Otherwise, it's just, you need more spacing. You need the ability for guys to cut. You need them to have that lane wide open. And, they didn't have it in this game. And the Clippers were able to kind of figure them out. I don't want to say like easily, but like easy enough that, once they went on their own run, they were like, well, we can hold you guys at bay. Not for nothing, too. I mean, the Clippers are one of, I think, the top 2 teams in the NBA this year in defense. So, that doesn't help the Knicks either. They're not at full strength. They were then without their, I would say, top 2 point guard options and top 3 guard options. If you're talking about who fills that one spot, we've both kind of said like we think Cam Payne maybe makes a little more sense with the starters than maybe not necessarily Deuce McBride, but like makes sense with the starters to kind of get the wheels greased and going. But without both those guys, and then without Deuce McBride too, who honestly probably would have made a difference on James Harden, because no matter who the Knicks put on him, his shiftiness was just a little too much for every defender that the Knicks threw at him, which is what led to those 3 threes in a row. Like, it was not the worst defense I've ever seen in my life. It was just one of the shiftiest players in NBA history on the perimeter was able to create just enough space. Maybe Deuce McBride would have been able to keep up with him a little better. I don't know, but either way, it was a tough night. Maybe we could talk a little more about the run that the Clippers went on and what went wrong for the Knicks. So we'll talk about that in the next segment in just a moment when we get back in to Locked On Knicks.
But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. So I'm picking my favorites. I had an eye on a few underdogs. Shout out Drexel. I was all in on Drexel in round 1. That worked out, at least for a little bit. And FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. I'm still staying in the action with tournament games happening almost every day, including tonight. If you're listening to this, there's always something exciting to bet on. Arizona over Duke. That'd be fun. Easy and fast. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, Alex, we are continuing to talk our way through a 126-113 loss to the Clippers. Before we go any further, we should note, because of a LeBron James tip-in, after he spent 2 hours talking to Pat McAfee, still had the energy to finish off the Indiana Pacers, who were charging hard. I think we're going for their 6th straight win, if I'm not mistaken. 120-119, literally only counted because LeBron was smart enough to just like pull his hand off the ball really quickly. If not, it probably would have been late. So the Knicks stay 3 games ahead of the Pacers in the standings, functionally 4 games because of the tiebreaker. If you're like me and maybe would slightly prefer to get the 4 seed, maybe you're not thrilled about that, but if that is ultimately the Knicks' goal, to stay in 3, and likely with the Damian Lillard news of him having a blood clot, hopefully he's back on the court soon. Likely will not be there for the next game against the Milwaukee Bucks on Friday. You are going to be getting that 3 seed, and you're going to be getting most likely a first round matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks, which I'm sure we will talk about a lot. But that sort of felt like a window of opportunity for the Pacers to sneak in there that they failed to take advantage of. So that is certainly something we'll watch going forward. But I don't know, man, where do you want to go next in this game? What stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would mostly just be what, I feel like this game was not necessarily the indictment on the Knicks defense that some of the games recently have been. Like, I don't, I think maybe that would be my first thing. It felt like if you were just like looking at the box score, that this game was blown by the team. And I don't necessarily know that that was the case. I think that they ran into some issues. Like, I will say the one tactical gaffe by Tibbs to me in this game was going, and I mean, maybe he's afraid of having Kolek play too many minutes because he just isn't like used to it. But ultimately, like in a game where you didn't have Cam Payne for the whole second half, Kolek still ends up only playing 18 and a half minutes. DeLon Wright plays a full 12. So I feel like that kind of, I don't want to like crap on DeLon Wright. He's a longtime NBA player. I'm sure he's a great vet and whatever else. And, a fine breaking case of emergency option for some defense or whatever. But it seemed obvious to me that these guys just didn't didn't have any chemistry with him.
We should just note real quick. It was the whole fourth quarter, right?
The whole fourth quarter.
Kolek did not come back in. Yep, sorry.
Right. The whole 12 minutes. Right. And so I don't know. I mean, you had a window of opportunity to possibly make a comeback. Like there was, I want to say it was around like the 7-minute mark. I was still looking at this game being like, I think they were down 11 at that point, and I was like, I could still see them making this comeback, and I feel like that would have been the opportunity to get Kolek back in there, and he instead doesn't. He keeps DeLon right in for the whole fourth quarter. It just was a little baffling to me. But like defensively, I thought that they did a more or less fine job even during that giant run. And there was a couple open threes that were set up by Harden and Kawhi, like just creating double teams, and that was kind of like what you were talking about that the Knicks couldn't find and haven't been able to find as much with Brunson out. I thought that was kind of just the difference. And unfortunately, I just think this is a case of like a talent deficit. Like the Knicks have banked a lot on Jalen Brunson, his durability, his, what he does on the basketball court, and particularly Tibbs's offense is extremely reliant on Jalen Brunson doing what Jalen Brunson does, which is just creating something out of nothing. And they've been missing that. I think you could take your steps down, and it's like, okay, you take a step down to Cam Payne. All right, cool. He can still create some offense. He's still functional, shooting himself. Like he has pull-up 3-point shooting. He has a little bit of a floater when it's on, so you can create like this little bit of a version of Jalen Brunson who's a little more focused on passing and whatever. And then you see his teammates kind of adjust by cutting more or whatever. And then you have Kolek, who can break the defense down, can at least start spraying it out to shooters or whatever. I mentioned before, I don't think the teams are really respecting him necessarily yet in terms of what he can create for himself, which limits you a little bit with him out there. But like his vision and passing is maybe the best on the team. I mean, he's got phenomenal instincts and ability. But then you take that step down to DeLon Wright, and it's like, he can give you some defense, but it seemed clear that he's not comfortable in this offense, especially in the role that the Knicks were going to need him in. So I feel like by keeping him in for that whole quarter kind of doomed them. Meanwhile, on the other side, it was just like Harden did Harden things. I mean, I think he had on those 3 straight 3-pointers, which again, I keep going back to, but they were literally, I mean, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Like the Knicks went from, they were up 2 with like 3 minutes and change left in the third quarter, and by 9 minutes and change in the fourth quarter, they were down like 12 already. So that run by Harden, the 3 straight threes, had a huge part to do with that. And then that was followed by Kawhi just going crazy at the early part of the fourth quarter. But I mean, those ones, it was just like there's nothing you could do against that. And really what they needed was the offensive counterpunch to just keep going blow for blow with the Clippers, because sometimes James Harden is just going to be James Harden and hit 3 threes, and you just need an answer for him. And there was no answer on the other end. I think that was ultimately what did it. But, you mentioned the numbers with Precious out there. I mean, just in general, the Knicks offense just has not looked as potent, especially against good teams lately without Jalen Brunson. And unfortunately, I think we're kind of reaching this point where it's like, they're not going to play as good against good teams if they don't have their best player. And there's nothing that can really be done about that, unfortunately. I don't know. It maybe kind of a lame duck response to this overall game, but like, I don't feel like the sky is falling. I don't feel like this is an indictment on the players or anything. It's just this team was built a certain way to be around a certain player. And some games against the better teams in the league, you're just going to lose because you don't have enough talent to make it happen.
Yeah, it is. It's a really interesting conversation because I'll start getting into it. I thought there was a lot of good in this game from Tom Thibodeau, and yet this team still just makes some inexplicable mistakes. Like Mikal had a stretch where he was trying to foul bait in the second quarter, and at one point, like he just and it was not a foul. Like he just kind of fell down, looking for a call from the refs, and he stared down the ref, and he was complaining to him. And meanwhile, Chris Dunn was on the other end of the floor getting a layup. And like you have plays where like they just like don't get matched up in transition. And it happens every single game. And typically like Cat is usually the guy who either doesn't run back or like doesn't know who he was guarding. Like he had one play. This wasn't even transition. I think this was off a made bucket. It was in semi-transition. Cat was guarding no one. and he's like pointing out guys on the back line, like trying to direct everyone. It's like, buddy, we're not. And Cat was amazing in this game. Like, I feel bad starting with this, but he crazy shot making again in this game. But like, he's on the back line guarding no one, and he's like trying to slide onto Zubac, but he doesn't tell OG Anunoby and say like, hey, buddy, like I'm taking my guy back, run out. And it ends up being a wide open drive and kick 3 for Norm Powell. And there's just like a bunch of that. Like, there's another play where OG switched on to Powell. As far as I could tell, he doesn't communicate it to Josh Hart. And it's a James Harden 3. Like, those were all communication mistakes. I thought there were just like some personnel deployment mistakes. Like, to your point, not going back to Kolek the whole fourth quarter, who's far from perfect. Like it is that is the whole conversation with him. Like, can he become a good enough scorer to access his passing? Because I've been saying it every show, but for people that listen to every show, like I think he's a top 5 to 10 passer in the NBA right now. Like, I think he's far and away the best passer the Knicks have. But like Benji brought up this name on the Knicks Film School podcast, like Kendall Marshall out of North Carolina in the past, or even like a better example is like another guy Benji brought up, Ricky Rubio. Like, your passing is only as functional as your scoring is. That being said, like I thought Kolek did a remarkably good job given like limited scoring. Like, he was still able to create stuff in the third quarter, and that just went away in the fourth because like they had nothing. Like, DeLon Wright at this point in his NBA career, at least like in this context coming into this game, like cold off the bench, was not going to all of a sudden be creating shots in the fourth quarter versus Tyler Kolek, who, like, whatever you want to say about his shot making, he had the nastiest like dribble move I've seen from a Nick all year, where he went behind his back in the backcourt and like literally just dropped Norm Powell. Like, Breen didn't make a big enough deal because he thought it was the screen, but watching on replay, it was literally just Kolek stopping on a dime, going behind the back, and Norm Powell falling. That was a play they got a 4-on-3 on, eventually scored on. And to the point of Tibbs doing like really good stuff in this game, like the amount of organized offense for the Knicks. I'll wait for Shaq's of Strickland fame for the official report of that, but it seemed like it was way up early in this game. Like, the Knicks are running help beaters. They are running like top block beaters, and they're getting all these back cuts, and both Cat and Josh Hart did such a good job passing out of it. I thought Tibbs did a really good job using Hart on the ball or as a screener, because the Clippers were not putting Zubac on Cat. They were putting Zubac on Hart and getting Zubac into the action, forcing him to be involved. That made things a lot easier in the Knicks. And even though Zubac is a defensive player of the year candidate, he is basically the one guy in that Clippers lineup outside of Harden you can target, but you can't even really target Harden because Zubac is so good on the back line. So I thought that was really smart how they played it. And on top of all of it, like, this gets back to the Harden point. Like, the Clippers were making tough shots in the second half, right? Those were like 2 of those Harden threes were like, it was a step back in the corner. It was a one in transition that was open. And then he hit a crazy one where he was trying to draw a foul at the top of the key. Like it wasn't really bad defense. The only bad defense one-on-one was Josh Hart, like just zero chance guarding either Harden or Kawhi. But for the most part, they guarded well, and the Clippers made great shots, and you tip your cap. Again, they are playing about as well as anyone in the NBA right now, Alex. But I want to get into some of the individual performances, because I thought Karl-Anthony Towns was incredible offensively in this game. OG Anunoby, it was some stat padding at the end, but he gets 28 again. Mikal had some really good stretches. Hart had a great start. So let's get into all that next right here on Locked On Knicks. All right. We were talking through a 126-113 win for the Clippers over the Knicks. Where do you want to start individual player wise?
I would say Cat. I mean, you let in at the end of the last segment. I agree. That was who I want to talk about next. I mean, I don't want to, it seems like we're discouraging what they did, but like he had a phenomenal game in this one. I think 34 points, 14 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals. I mean, for whatever you want to say about, the Knicks creation deficit or whatever right now, like, and when that rears its ugly head sometimes, like Cat, to his credit, has been doing everything you would expect him to reasonably do on offense lately, and then some. I mean, just consistently flirting with 30 plus points every single night. Looked great in this one, busted out the whole bag, had 4-7 from 3. I mean, just looked really comfortable shooting the 3 ball, which, as it is often, was, I think, what helped open things up for him, though that wasn't exclusively what led to the rest of his offense. He had a lot of great possessions on the block, had a really nice a nice one where he was given baseline at one point and, turned the corner with his left hand to go baseline, then went up for a really powerful dunk. That one stood out to me. He had a couple of driving plays that were really solid where he drove in, got tough layups, had a nice offensive rebound off as Clyde might say, off a UFO. A 3-pointer that just went a little over the rim from the corner, and then
Cat went over the backboard. If you're talking about the Shamet one in the first quarter, it was the worst shot I've ever seen, and Cat made it happen.
Cat managed to corral it. Yeah. So Shamet misses everything. Cat manages to corral it. Gathers himself, gets underneath, and finishes with a nice little hook shot. I mean, it was. You said it. Like, I thought Zubats had a fantastic game in this one. I thought that he really affected a lot. And I think that his defense was a lot of what kind of stopped the Knicks from being able to come back once Harden and Kawhi went on that run. And, to Cat's credit, I think that he was able to still find his offense, even, when matched up against the opposing team's best defensive player at times. So, yeah, I think Cat had a phenomenal game. I think that he definitely deserves some flowers in this one. I mean, he's doing everything that he can. You can't really expect the guy to, be an offensive engine in the sense of being a guy that you start every possession with or anything like that. So in the context of what Cat's really good at, he's doing phenomenal. That does give me some hope for when Brunson gets back that Cat is going to look more like his old self, because we were seeing, prior to Brunson getting hurt, Cat looking, I don't want to say lost, but just underutilized a bit, he just wasn't being looked at as much for those pick and pop scenarios. Like, that there wasn't as much of an effort to feed him. And we saw that way more early in the season. So, hopefully once Brunson gets back, we see more of kind of that early season offense and symbiosis between the two. And then, we kind of get the best version of both of them. But yeah, I mean, with Cat doing what he's doing, Mikhail doing what he's doing, and OG doing what he's doing on offense, like, there is something to be said for, at least, even if these guys are suffering some tough losses right now, they're kind of getting in a groove, and that should, in theory, allow them to have a little more diversity on offense when they need it once Brunson is back, and then, hopefully offer Jalen some more off-ball opportunities and stuff like that, so that, he can find kind of his best self or whatever. But there's been some encouraging signs on offense, like with Brunson down, or at least as encouraging as it can be without your best player. I thought this game kind of showcased it for Cat, for OG, even for Mikhail a little bit with the ball handling. Like, he ended up with 9 assists. So even in a tough loss, there's still a little bit that was silver lining in this one.
Yeah, and look, I think the issue with Cat, like the inability of Cat to pass out of double teams is just, and like it's weird to phrase it this way, because if other guys on the roster again like had more ability to initiate offense, it wouldn't be as much of an issue. And to your point, he has been like, here are the stats: 10 games since Brunson got hurt, 27 points, 10 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 52% from the field, 46% from three, 79% from the line. Like, he might not be like a play starter all the time. Like, he can sometimes like catch and go one-on-one. But like that level of efficiency, given like the lack of creativity outside of him on the roster, and the fact that like he is seeing constant extra defenders, is pretty extraordinary. Like, he is about as good of a quote unquote play finisher as there is in basketball. But the struggles to pass against double teams, like Bailey Liao, our buddy who was on the show earlier this year, pointed out in a tweet, but like, just like anytime he is like posting up or like facing up, and the Clippers were really smart sending that double after he'd already taken his first dribble, it's like play over with. And you would just like, he doesn't have to make the perfect pass. You would just like him to be a little bit more patient. Like, more often than not, his solution is to just like put his head down and like go like full like caveman style and be like, Cat gets rim no matter what, and just like try to bully through 3 guys. And like, to his credit, like if the double doesn't come fast enough, like he's able to do it. Like I think these are some of the plays you were referencing, but he was having like these rapid fire like spin moves. Like had one for like a layup, had another one on Batum where he went reverse and he went baseline. He had a one-handed jam, and it was like Kawhi and Harden both tried to double. And sort of speaking of like child cartoons that just like crashed into each other, and both had like the spinning like concussion wheel over their head, and Cat just jammed it in. Like some of the jumpers he was making, like deep threes, and one on Derrick Jones Jr. were just amazing. But I'll touch on Josh Hart next. Even though the box score was not anything to write home about, I do think he was pretty much the key for the Knicks offense in the first half of this game. Certainly like in transition. And we talk about like, all right, how do you make up for lack of initiation? And for Hart, like a lot of it was just like anytime he had the basketball, like playing really fast. And also Tibbs, again, give Tibbs credit, like using him as a screener. Like they had one play where they had him come up again to get Zubac into the action, have him come up, screen for Cat. He dove to the rim. Cat hit him on a way too hard pass. Hart caught it, like tiptoed the baseline, sprayed to the corner to Mikal. Mikal extra swing. Payne hit the three. That was really good. There was another one that was like the exact same play they scored on the other night, where Mikal screened off ball for Cam, and Cam's just up on the arc. And then at that point, like Mikal's essentially being like top locked because they're trying to switch, but Mikal's underneath, and Mikal is like facing the other basket, but then it's like a pick and roll, like just turns inside, rolls to the rim, and Hart hit him just with this beautiful bounce pass. Hart had another one of those where he had like a Nash dribble, and he spotted OG cutting out of the corner of his eye, and he dribbled all the way up to the opposite wing, sprays like a bounce pass like perfectly to OG cutting to the rim for a layup. Like another one like in transition where he just had this rampage drive, drawing two, slung it out, got Payne an open three. Like I thought even though Hart struggled on defense, struggled scoring the basketball, I thought it was impressive the way like he kind of turned something into nothing just by making quick decisions in this game. And that stood out to me because that is the Josh Hart the Knicks are going to need, I think, for him to stay on the floor in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then as we keep moving along here, I think OG Anunoby, you mentioned a little bit of garbage time padding, but pretty solid offensive game for him. He ends with 28 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, a steal. I've been enjoying what we're continuing to see out of him in terms of being able to put the ball on the floor, like get all the way to the inside, sort of similar to Mikal. You mentioned that he doesn't really have like the sauce to just like break guys down and like really draw people in. And it's similar for OG. Most of what he's going to do is cuts and, like 2-3 dribble, type scenarios where he's able to just attack from the perimeter. But seeing more of that from him in this game. And I mean, that was something that we saw from him early in the season, which again sort of faded away over time and then now has come back again. But just the strength with which he attacks lately too has been very refreshing. And again, it helps that the 3-point shot is back for him, so that makes teams take him seriously on the perimeter and like really guard him close. But then there's like the two-handed dunks off of cuts, and like we know that that's kind of a staple for him. And he had a couple of those in this game, but one in particular, there was I forget who he ended up throwing his shoulder into, but he gets inside and, it was on a cut and gets in there and then just like throws the shoulder into his defender, creates a little extra bit of space. It's all that stuff that we're seeing from OG that makes me think like, okay, yeah, this guy, like we see every time I feel like that he comes back from an injury and, this is just human nature. He tends to get a little more like timid in terms of how much he wants to throw his body around for a little bit. We saw it, I think, at the beginning of the season, and then we saw it when he came back at first from the foot sprain. And then, we see him get a little more comfortable in his own skin again. And then, he doesn't play super vertical around other guys around the rim, which I think is wise because that's where turned ankles happen and everything, and where lower leg injuries can happen landing on someone. But if he's getting more comfortable now with just kind of getting into guys with his whole body and creating space. And I think that's useful, especially when the Knicks play like they're more optimal offensive lineups, when it gets down to like having a full strength lineup and having their starting lineup that they've had for the full season again, or most of the season again, of Brunson, Mikal, Hart, OG, and Cat. When you can have that 5-out spacing and then have OG go in there and get a one-on-one against, I don't know, the third or fourth strongest player on the opposing team and just be able to throw that shoulder and create that space, like it adds a different dimension to the offense, I think. So I've been liking that wrinkle to his game lately. We got to see it a bit in this game, as he had a nice efficient one and flirted with 30 points again.
Yeah, I mean his finishing is always good just because he is so strong around the rim. But I think this is the most creative we've ever seen it. Like on that play I referenced earlier, where Hart kind of circled up and then hit him cutting on the opposite elbow. Like he just had like an up and under over Zubac. It's stuff. It's similar to that Pacers game where like occasionally, and it's clear like he works on all this stuff, and it just clicks in sometimes. And he has these finishes. And you're like, whoa, I didn't know he could do that. And you're kind of just like holding your breath. You're like, all right, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. Like another one where Cat hit him on an outlet, and he had just a nasty Euro on James Harden, and then finish overdone. Had one in the fourth quarter that I thought was probably a travel, but maybe not, where he just had a reverse spin move through a double team, and it looked like he took 3 steps, but what? He got to the rim, he finished, it wasn't called, so it counts. Like the Knicks had some nice counters, like when Harden was top blocking him going backdoor for a layup off a nice hook pass from Cat. Like it was just good variety. Hasn't been hitting the corner three, but the last 2 games, it like looks really smooth shooting it. So hopefully there's more of that. We could maybe just go rapid fire through the rest of the guys, because I know we're running a little long. This is like weirdly a game the Knicks lose by 13, but I feel like there's a million things to talk about. Mikal, again, I thought the off ball usage from him was like really good. Like the Knicks again ran that exact same play that they ran at the start of last game, where he's screening off ball for Cam Payne, and with Cam up on the arc, you just wait for a switch. It's the play I referenced before, and he just kind of gets inside leverage and then can just pivot towards the rim. Like I hope they keep going to that, because it seems to work almost automatically. Hopefully I'm just doing that justice and describing it right. I thought, given how crappy that lineup he got at the start of the second quarter, Alex, like Mikal did basically everything that he's capable of doing in terms of like being aggressive. Like had that one drive baseline by Kawhi off a catch on the move, was hitting tough jumpers. Had the shot at the very end of the half where, again, they had Hart come up, screen for him, get Zubac out on a switch, and he goes right at Zubac and puts a jumper in his eye. Second half was pretty quiet, but to your point, the passing was still there. So I thought it was like all things considered and understanding, like he kind of is who he is at this point. Again, I was like frustrated with some of the not getting back on defense and some of the effort on defense, and I couldn't comprehend why he wasn't guarding Harden and Hart was guarding Harden. Maybe just a strength thing. I thought he was about as good as he could have been.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And honestly, we are running a little long, and I don't have anything else to add on this game. So I think we could probably wrap this one up and get ready for a game against the Bucks. Probably Damian Lillard-less Bucks, thanks to the deep vein thrombosis he's got going on. Hopefully that gets better. I unfortunately know how those go from not from my life, but from others in my life. They're a scary thing to deal with. So hopefully Lillard's good. Though it seems like it was managed pretty quickly. But either way, maybe a little bit of a soft landing for the Knicks, facing a team that's also without their starting point guard, though still probably with Giannis Antetokounmpo. So we'll see how that goes when the Knicks face them on Friday. We'll have you covered with another episode this week, whether it's recapping that game or perhaps one tomorrow, and then a weekend recap on Monday. But either way, we've got you covered for all the upcoming games and everything else. Till next time, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.